What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. So in this video, I want to talk about this whole situation that has unfolded featuring, well, starring Keke Wyatt. And I'm not like extremely familiar with Keke Wyatt, but I have heard of her. I don't know any of her music. I never heard any of her songs. If someone put a gun to my head and said, name a Keke Wyatt song, or else I'm going to shoot you dead, then I'd be shot dead because I don't know any of her discography, unfortunately, or fortunately in this case. But she recently made the blogs, recently made entertainment news in the blogs, at least the black social media spaces or whatever. Because she was, kind of having some moments in an interview that she was doing. And, these moments were weird moments because they revolved around the topic of race. And Keke Wyatt is biracial. She has a white mother and a black father. And they got on the topic, I think somehow, some way they got on the topic of race. And Keke, she kind of suffers from what some people call white mama syndrome, unfortunately. And let me see if I can explain that for you and just kind of break that down and tell you what exactly that is about. It's sort of like where a biracial person is raised by their white parent, oftentimes their white mother, and they kind of may view themselves as being other outside of whiteness, but because they have an in to the white world, or kind of like a view, an inside point of view, or at least a very close point of view of kind of like whiteness and white people, and kind of are a bit more privy to situations involving white people behind closed doors, they feel like they may be an exception. And they also have like a strong allegiance to their white side because of this. And she was raised by her white mom. So I don't think that would be completely out of bounds to say that. Um, yeah. So, despite being othered from whiteness, they still kind of feel like they may be a bit more like special. I'll put it that way, because they kind of have a connection, kind of like an inside connection to whiteness, and are a bit like a lot more privy to kind of like white people's point of views, white people's conversations behind closed doors, etc. Right? So I think for Keke, I think that may be at play as well. And also, she kind of, during that whole back and forth exchange, argument, whatever you want to call it, she jumped back and forth between being biracial and being black, which a lot of people called out too, because that's like, and it's not even within like, oh, a couple of weeks later she's saying she biracial, or a couple of weeks later she's saying she black. It's not even like a couple of days. It's like, a couple of minutes later in the same conversation, she's jumping back and forth, you know? And that is something that some biracial folks do. Not all, but some. And, I do think there is a difference between biracials who have been socialized into blackness versus biracials socialized into blackness by black people. Like, they may have been raised by like the black side of their family, for one reason or another. I think, there's a difference, I think, between those biracials and biracials that were raised by like their non-black side, especially if their non-black side has low-key kind of like anti-black racist sentiments towards black people, which I think Keke has sort of, picked up on and inherited from her white mom, perhaps, or either just being in the position that she's in, where she's like, she's part white, but she's not full white, so she's not fully accepted by white people, and sort of having an animosity towards black people because of that, as if the black race in general caused that. No, that was your black father. That was your black daddy. And, where is he in all this, too? Because that's another thing. Folks want to have all these conversations about black women and their biracial children, particularly their daughters. But I'm like, well, what are black men doing when it comes to their biracial children? I don't really think they're doing much, to usher in the greatest wave of biracial children that ever existed. You know, like half of the time, the black men don't even want to do right by the black children in the community. The absentee black father stereotype exists for a reason. Let's be real. So, I find that funny as well. But that's a bit off topic. But back to this topic. So, Kiki Wyatt was in a interview doing like a live stream or whatever, and then they got on the topic of fried chicken and like Popeye's fried chicken and KFC fried chicken. And I think someone has said something that was like, oh, something to the effect of like, the people from Popeye's chicken who made the recipe are like black folk, and they ain't really profit off of it as much as they should have. And they may have said or implied that like white people were behind it, and Kiki got offended by it because she's, despite being a strong black queen named Shaquita. We'll get into that a little later in this video too. But despite being a strong black queen named Shaquita, she didn't like that they were blaming white folks, because she kind of takes that offensively. And she takes it as like, even though no one said that her white mama in particular did it, she said white people, they were just blaming perhaps white people in general. But she took offense to that, and then they kind of had a back and forth based on that. And she wound up referring to one of the black men that was on the panel, or who were on the panel, as a quote-unquote chunky monkey, and also called him the N-word, and also called him a queen. So you got like, colorism, racism, homophobia kind of like all stirred up in there, right? And some people can argue like, well, chunky monkey isn't necessarily a racist phrase per se. And perhaps, there's an argument for that. The phrase chunky monkey, I think it may be more so about someone's weight versus perhaps someone's race. But some people, feel like, well, she's biracial, and as a biracial person, she shouldn't be referring to like a black person who is monoracially black, fully black as monkey. There's an argument for that as well. But she also called him the N-word, and then, folks took offense to that as well, because they felt like she was coming from a place of privilege, like being biracial and calling him the N-word as a way to sort of like be like, I'm up here, you're down here. Something like that. And then some folks took offense to him, or to Kiki calling him a queen, because he is a homosexual. And then some people may have took offense to her referring to his green hair as Kool-Aid color. Let your Kool-Aid color shine through. Right, she was singing. I'm like, uh-oh, Kiki might have a hit song on her hand. The closest thing she had to a hit song since that song she did with Avant. And then during the interview, she would kind of like do these voices, and it was a bit odd. And it would kind of be like, basically it would kind of like boil down to like maybe 2, maybe 3 different voices. It was like when she was in like her black mode, you know, in her, you know, black, style or whatever you want to call it. She was talking a bit more like, Shaquita, and, a bit more like the quote unquote, stereotypical, sassy black woman, you know. But then when she would say like certain phrases that could be perceived as like racist, colorist, or homophobic, she would turn into like this southern voice for some reason, you know. And so, Shaquita, she'd be all like, oh yeah, that's how she expresses her anger, I think, too. At least partially when she turns into Shaquita, right? And I do find that to be a little problematic. I know people can kind of joke about that. People have made jokes about that with like Kamala Harris as well, where it's like, oh yeah, she black. Look how she talking to them, right? She's setting them straight, right? And I know that's like ha ha he a joke, But, there's some kind of like, it's a bit problematic if you really think about it, because you kind of like associating black women and blackness, female blackness with like anger or having an attitude, you know. But that's a deeper discussion for another day, unfortunately. But she was turning into Shaquita, calling him the N word, like, I'm gonna put you in check, I'm gonna put you in check, Jigga. You don't be talking to me like that. You done bumped your head, Jigga. And then when she wanted to turn into like either the white side or her biracialness or whatever, then she gets this like thick southern accent for some reason. And it's like, sugar, you don't be talking to me like that, all right? Mm-hmm. You and your Kool-Aid colors can go, all right? No. You don't talk to me like that. Not with those Kool-Aid colors over there. Mm-mm. And at one point or another, then this conversation it just started to go real left and left and left, and then he wound up accusing her of being drunk, and then she got offended by that, like, I ain't drunk, honey. Did she say that in a southern voice or in like her Shaquita voice? I don't know. I think she may have used her Shaquita voice in that at that time. So I'm gonna need like up to date updates on if Keke Wyatt is black at this particular moment in time, her like biracial or white. I'm gonna need some updates. Like, I'm gonna have to sign up for her Twitter account or her Instagram account to keep up with that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like Shekinah jumped into the conversation, and she was trying to be mediator, peacemaker, bring folks together, and try and just diffuse the situation and de-escalate the situation. And then at one point or another, then Keke Wyatt starts getting emotional and crying, and then she starts talking in this southern voice while crying. I'm like, where did all this come from? And she's talking about oppression too, and how the black girls didn't want to play with her. I'm like, where did this come from? He's like, ever since I was a little tater tot, I got it so bad from both sides. All I ever did wrong was be born. And then the dudes on the panel was all like, you too pretty to be crying. Stop crying, Master Kiki. Stop a-crying, Master Kiki. Dry your eyes, Mr. Kiki. We gonna take care of you. I'm like, really? After she done stirred up all this BS, she gets, oh, it's okay. It's not your fault. You didn't know no better, right? And also, she's like equating the black girls not playing with her to oppression. You know, like, this is oppression at the highest order. Oh my God. Those little black girls on the playground back when I was in kindergarten didn't want to play with me. Oh. Even though the white girls, she said, didn't want to play with her either, you know. And I'm just like, whew. I'm not saying that Kiki Wyatt doesn't have a story or that she can't tell her story, but I don't think this is the time to tell it, and as well to use your experience to derail having to take responsibility for the BS that you stirred up, right? And also, I'm like, at this point in your life, I think you're like, what, about 40 years old at least at this point? And I'm not even saying that to be, shady or anything. Let's see, it looks like she's 38 years old. Old enough, right? I guess she's still dealing with this like childhood trauma about, being biracial and perhaps not being accepted or feeling accepted by white folks or black folks, even though black folks are the ones who pretty much gave you the little career that you got and you only here because of black folk. You only got the little that you got because of black folks. Because white folks wasn't checking for you like that. Let's keep it all the way 100. White folks ain't trying to deal with you or your white mama. Your trashy white mama either. Right? And also, it was a little bit of shade when she, like, somehow, I don't know if this was in a different interview. The thing is, I kind of heard about this from the YouTuber Paris Milan, and she did a live stream where she played various clips. So this may have been from a different interview. I'm not sure if this is the same thing or not. But she also said, Kiki Wyatt also said, like, somehow Beyonce wound up coming up. And then I kind of, picked up some subtle shade on that too, or some shade, where basically I think that she's somewhat resentful that she didn't take off, like her career didn't pop off like Beyonce's career popped off. And I think she may be thinking her career popped off because of, Beyonce being light skinned, and she's like, well, I'm biracial, so biracial better than light skinned. So why ain't my career pop off? I can sing too. And I heard some people say that she can really sing, and okay, that's what's up. But maybe Beyonce's career popped off because perhaps Beyonce, put in a lot of work, and I'm not like, a Beyonce stan or part of the Beehive, or anything like that. But, I will give Beyonce credit and say that, she's a hard worker. She put in work to get where she's at. It wasn't just handed to her, right? At one point in Beyonce's career, people actually, this may be a big surprise to some of you, especially the younger folks who may watch my videos, but there was a time when people didn't even think that Beyonce could have a solo career. As you don't hear about that too much because Beyonce done blew up to be like, a megastar, but, a solo megastar. But back in the day, people were actually kind of like thinking that Kelly's career was going to pop off more than Beyonce's career did. And it was because of Beyonce catching so much backlash from the group change, right? And because of that and other situations, people didn't think that Beyonce's career would really pop off like it. People didn't even think Beyonce could really have a solo career, let alone a successful solo career, or a mega successful solo career, right? So, long story short, to bring it back to this, Kiki Palmer, Kiki Wyatt, and her friends or interview folks or whatever. Seemed to be a bit resentful that Beyonce's career popped off while Kiki's didn't, And it's like, well, why are you hating? And also people speculate that Kiki's career didn't pop off because of like behind the scenes drama as well. I'm not really familiar with that, so I don't know. And also, to bring up that's a bit off topic, I guess, but I'll bring it up because it kind of relates a little bit. You know, recently, probably like a few months ago, Mariah Carey did an interview with Oprah Winfrey, and it was like a really long interview, probably like about 2 hours. And one of the topics that they spoke about was, Mariah Carey's biracial experience as a child, and probably just in general, but especially as a child, especially in the time that she grew up in. And I do notice, like in Mariah Carey's biracial story, she never pointed the finger at the black girls. Maybe because she just never had an interaction with them as children, as a child. But I noticed that she typically pointed the finger at the white girls and how they treated her, and how, you know, one of them or some of them referred to her as, like, quote unquote, the mulatto B, and quote unquote an N. And I know, like, someone had spit on her at one point, right? And then she had brought a friend over to her father's house, and her friend, had a panic attack when she saw her father. You know, things like that, right? And she also said that when she dated Derek Jeter, she was able, that was a good experience for her as far as seeing, like, a happy, well functioning biracial blended family. And it kind of told her, like, oh, your situation, your family situation wasn't messed up just because of the biracial, interracial aspect of it. It was other factors in it. It wasn't just that, because this is a happy, functioning biracial family, or blended interracial family, whatever you want to call it. And I thought that was really good to, like, she was able to have that moment and see that, and not kind of like attribute her being biracial to, like, her family being messed up, you know. And also, she spoke about her experiences with her siblings too, and kind of like, because of Mariah Carey's phenotype versus her siblings' phenotype, and she kind of felt like her siblings kind of had some resentment over the fact that she kind of like looked like she could pass for white, and people, her siblings, may have assumed that she was passing for white. Yeah. Low-key some animosity, because they probably just assumed her to be the more privileged child because of her phenotype. And, I don't think that is, I think there may be some truth in that, depending on the situation, at least. But, um, that was just how Mariah Carey came out of the womb. She couldn't really pick how she looked, right? Yeah. And oddly enough, even though Mariah Carey, more or less identifies as biracial, she seems to kind of gravitate more towards black people versus white people. She has dated white men before in the past, and she was married to a white man at one point, Tommy Mottola. But she seems to gravitate more towards black people than white people. And why do you think that is? And I think a big part of it is maybe she just feels more accepted by black people. Despite her being Mariah Carey, despite all that she has achieved, you know, you know, despite being, the golden mulatto, you know, white folks, she may just not feel that love from white folks like she feels it from black folks. And I say all that to bring it back to Kiki and her biracial story. And, not to say that every biracial has the same story. That's not true. But Kiki, she did point the finger at black folks, especially black girls, and said that she was so oppressed because they didn't want to play with her. And it's like, well, black women are primarily the ones that are supporting you. So it may have been like that in the past, but it's not like that currently, right? And it's not, you know. And I feel like she would never have this animosity and attitude towards white folks. I feel like some of these biracial folks, they know who to get that attitude with. They know who to try that BS with, right? They know that white folks are not even going to be entertaining them like this, right? Rarely. Rarely has that ever happened. And if by chance it did, you know best and believe those biracial people would make sure to be the most politically correct, polite, make sure they choose the right words to say. They're not going to be just, she can't pull this with white folks and be all like, they ain't never, the white girls didn't want to play with me. It just ain't going to fly. It don't work the same, right? The white folks ain't going to be coddling her, all right? They don't care about you like that, Kiki, you know. And I brought up Mariah Carey because, again, look with all that she has achieved, you know, she has like a look that is very palatable to white folks as well. She even married white at one point or another, right? But even still, for some reason, she was not able to get that acceptance from white folks. That's why she gravitates more towards black people. She did have her children with a black man, Nick Cannon, even though he's problematic and colorist and whatever. But she did have her children with a black man. And, her best friend is a black woman, the brat. And, it seems like Mariah Carey tends to gravitate more towards black folks, despite identifying as biracial, right? But I think I've said all I have to say for the moment, at least. I don't think I have anything else to say, other than, Keke Wyatt may not be all the way right up in the head. I hate to say that, but I don't know. She may be suffering from some sort of a mental illness, perhaps, as well. She still is responsible for what she's did. I'm not saying that completely, alleviates her of responsibility. Just like Kanye West is responsible for what he did and does too, right? Even though he is, bipolar. So, we can hold folks accountable while acknowledging that mental illness is a serious topic and a serious matter that we need to be more aware of as a community, right? And like at this point, I'm just like, so Kiki, are you black today? Are you biracial today? What's up? What she is today, Kiki? What is you today, Kiki? Is you a black woman named Shaquita? Or is you a white woman named Sally Mae Karen Sue? What is you, Kiki? What is you doing today? So that's all I gotta say, right? And and again, black folks coddling, black. And I guess one more thing I could bring up: if Kiki Wyatt was a unambiguous brown skinned, dark skinned woman doing the same thing, acting the same way, do you think that people would have reacted the same way and went into coddle mode and be like, oh, it's okay, it's all right? Like if she was doing the same thing but just brown skin or dark skin and not biracial, do you think it would have went down the same way, or do you think people would have handled it a little differently? Let me know in the comment section. And to the next video, adios and goodbye for now.